Hey there, all you beautiful souls. I hope your day has been absolutely fantastic. It's a pleasure to have you back for yet another exciting episode of What If Naruto Was the Descendant of Scorpion. Don't forget to pay a visit to the author of this captivating fanfiction and show them some love. You'll find the link waiting for you down in the description. If this what if is sparking your curiosity, drop a comment down below and share your thoughts. And while you're at it, don't miss out on exploring the plethora of other intriguing what ifs available on this very channel. Alright, let's not keep you waiting any longer, let's dive right into this thought-provoking video. Unknown location. Rock Lee. Right kick. Left kick. Lock. Dodge. Lee opened his eyes and lifted himself off the ground and looked around. He found himself in a small room. The room was rather bland. Beige-colored walls and a single opening, leading out to a long stretch of hallway. Where am I? Lee murmured to himself as he stood up off the ground. The last thing he remembered was fighting that Kunoichi before he was stabbed in the chest. He glanced down at his chest and saw a hole in his jumpsuit, revealing his well-toned chest. Lee stumbled out of the room and walked into the hallway, which revealed a large courtyard with several rows of bald men in orange and yellow monk attire, each of them performing katas lead by a single man. The man had on a red and blue shirt with a white trim with black shoulder pads and chest armor with a white trim, black gloves, tan pants and a black pants. But what was stuck out to Lee more was the large hat that covered the upper half of his face, but Lee could see the spiky metal edges on the edge of the hat reflecting the sunlight. The man tilted his head up and stared straight at Lee, his brown eyes shining in amusement, before he relaxed his stance and raised his hands, which caused the monks to stop their movements. That is enough. Our guest has awakened, the man said as he motioned to Lee and said, "Calm down. We have much to discuss." Lee leapt over the banister and landed in the courtyard, as the monks retreated from the courtyard, leaving the two of them alone. "Where am I? Who are you?" Lee questioned. "Me? I am the greatest Shaolin monk alive. The legendary Kung Lao announced to the green-wearing shinobi arrogantly. "But I've never heard of you before," Lee said with an innocent expression on his face. Kung Lao smirked and said, "Of course you haven't. Someone as young as you wouldn't know the legend that my bloodline carries." Lee felt his jaw clench. If there was one thing that he despised was someone speaking about family or bloodlines. He never let on how angry he could get whenever Neji went on about how skilled his clan was back before Hinata had knocked him off of his pedestal. He wouldn't deny that the reason he despised those two words or anyone that talked about them was due to him being an orphan. He had no one until Mito Guy had come into his life to show him that he was more than an orphan. Guy showed him that bloodlines didn't matter. All that mattered was his skills, his heart and the hunger that drove his soul. "Nor do I care," Lee said, the rare feeling of anger filling his veins. "Bloodlines are meaning. It's who you are as a person that matters. And I wonder why you formed that opinion, Rock Lee. Is it because you were abandoned by your parents, which forced you to be all alone with no name or bloodline to call your own, or is it due to them leaving you with a crushing handicap, making you end up being a pity case for a passing ninja to help you achieve your dreams?" Kung Lao asked, a smug smirk forming on the man's face. Lee hadn't known what happened. One minute he was standing and the next, he was in the air, his leg had slammed into the left forearm of Kung Lao's. Kung Lao smirked and gripped Lee's leg, and swung him around before releasing his grip, which caused Lee to fly towards the wall where he crashed against it. Lee fell to one knee and rose to his feet, as Kung Lao swiftly dragged his right foot into the sand, making a line before he rapidly punched the air, causing pink lotus flower petals to float from his fists, then settled into his fighting style, a smirk playing on his lips. "Come nobody and allow me to show you how powerful my bloodline can be." The two stood in their spots, glaring at one another until a leaf fell to the ground, and that was when the two ran towards each other. But Lee quickly leapt up and aimed a flying kick to Kung Lao's face, but he rolled forward, effectively sending him soaring above him. Lee landed on the ground and quickly turned around and shouted "Konoha Senpu." Delivered a quick roundhouse kick with leaves accompanying his kick, but Kung Lao ducked the kick, and as Lee landed, Kung Lao swept his leg against Lee's foot, tripping him to the ground. Kung Lao then flipped forward as he did the splits, aiming the heel of his right foot at Lee's head, but Lee turned his body and rolled to the left to once again avoid the heel of the Shaolin monk, before he jumped to his feet again. But just as Kung Lao got to his feet, Lee leapt into the air and whipped his left leg up, and nailed the man in the face with his left knee. Lee fell to the ground while Kung Lao staggered backwards in a slight daze from the sudden blow. Seeing his opponent slightly off-kilter, Lee ran forward, and when he got close, the teen aimed a left hook to the man's right side, but Kung Lao caught the hand. Li could see the smirk on Kung Lao's face before he was pushed away by the monk, before he was then tugged forward sharply, and Li could barely make out that his hand was released before Kung Lao's arm slammed into his upper chest and neck, which sent him slamming onto the ground mat on his back. Li writhed in pain from the sudden blow, but despite the pain, he could hear his opponent's feet skid against the ground. Forcing the pain away from his mind, Li turned his body and pushed himself to his feet, but immediately ducked a flying kick from Kung Lao, feeling the air whoosh above his head, due to the swift speed of the other man. Li didn't waste any time however, because the minute the man passed over him, Li quickly turned his body and ran towards Kung Lao, and just as the monk landed and turned around, Li had leapt up and slammed his left knee into the right cheek of the larger man, who tilted off his right foot off the ground. Li landed in front of him and quickly twisted his body, and landed a right hook against the left cheek of Kung Lao's face, which caused the monk's body to get firmly on his 2 feet, and it was then Li began to rain down fists on his opponent's body. From face to chest, Li's fists seemed to go anywhere that could damage the bigger man, but after he landed a straight jab to the middle of Kung Lao's face, Kung Lao's own fist slammed into Li's gut, which caused the teen to suck in a breath while leaning around the fist. As Li tried to catch his breath, Kung Lao's right hand met Li's face in a hard grip, before Kung Lao leapt into the air, which caused Li's own feet to leave the ground where Kung Lao spun in the air, and slammed Li onto his back hard. Kung Lao then released Li's face and lifted his hand into the air, and balled it into a fist, but Li quickly placed 2 feet to Kung Lao's chest and pushed hard, causing the Shaolin monk to fly backwards, only to recover and land on his feet. Li rose up from the ground and rose onto one knee and panted heavily, his vision blurring as Kung Lao stood across from him. "Give up nobody," Kung Lao ordered. "I am far stronger than you could imagine, and I'm not even using any of my special techniques. You can't win." "Never," Li said with a determined glare on his face. "For I could never live with myself if I did." Li stood up on his feet and narrowed his eyes at his opponent and said, "Because you're right. I was abandoned by my family, and I do have a handicap that prevents me from being a normal shinobi, but when the chips were down, Gai-sensei was the one who believed in me when no one else would." Li balled up his right fist and pointed it at Kung Lao and said, "So you can sit there on your high horse, and brag about how great your bloodline is. I've heard it all before, but no matter how long it takes, no matter how many lumps I get, no matter how many life-threatening missions I go through, I will show the world that any dream can be achieved through dedication, desire and hard work." And with that yell, Li dashed forward and shouted, "Konoha Senpu," and aimed a left roundhouse kick to the rising Kung Lao's head, but the Shaolin monk ducked it and swung his leg against Li's right leg. Li began to fall, but the green-wearing shinobi placed his hands on the ground and flipped back to him feet, and blocked Kung Lao's own left roundhouse kick. Li then kicked Lao's right knee, which caused the monk to on one knee, but Kung Lao caught Li's left knee when Li attempted to knee his face, and pushed it back hard. Li fell to one knee, and the two stared at each other, before Li began to aim 3 jabs at Kung Lao's face, but the monk smacked each jab away, before he grabbed Li's fist on the 4th jab, and stood up quickly and launched him backwards. Li recovered and landed on his feet, but Kung Lao quickly advanced, and their clash began. Punches and kicks flew between the two combatants, and while Li fought with every inch of his might, he knew that Kung Lao was faster. So Li began to push himself harder. Blow by blow, Li's speed began to slowly increase against Kung Lao, before he managed to nail a brutal right fist into Kung Lao's face, sending the Shaolin monk skidding against the ground before Li fell to one knee, panting heavily. "I did it. I got you," Li panted out with a toothy grin. Kung Lao stood up from the ground, his hat off of his head to reveal his long black hair. He then stood up, and the arrogant smirk faded away into a faint smile, as he relaxed his fighting stance. "You passed," Kung Lao told him, which made Li blink in confusion. "Village of Hisako. UN hunting squad. Cage Teiwaya." Teiwaya had to admit, but coming back to Hisako filled her with unintended excitement. After Kurenai and Unko came back alive and well, the group decided to return to the village to get help for the still unconscious Kakashi, Samui, Aomoi, Ino, Shikamaru and Naruto. Thankfully, Guy had appeared to help carry the load and get them to the village safely. However, there were so many questions that was left unanswered. How did Unko and Kurenai come back to life? Why had Shao Kahn come back? What had happened to Naruto? And what would happen now? Teiwaya didn't concern herself too much about the questions. That was more for the others to figure out. All she needed was a hot shower to ease her sore muscles and the worries about her friends. But it was then Teiwaya saw her. Standing at the front of the gate with 2 soldiers was Fu. She was talking to them with a serious expression on her face, and saw the fierceness in her orange eyes that made Taewaya's heart skip a beat. It was then Fu turned around and saw the group, and it was then their eyes connected. Despite how exhausted Fu looked, Taewaya thought she was beautiful. Taewaya watched as a wide smile appeared on the teal-haired girl's face, but that then changed to worry, no doubt due to how haggard she and the others looked. Fu rushed the two soldiers away and walked towards the group and asked what happened. But Taewaya noticed that Fu locked eyes with her. Well, a powerful and evil man was released from his slumber and was going to raise some hell, but we stomped him out. Not without losses, however, Taewaya replied. Can you put us up at the hotel? Do you even need to ask? Fu retorted before she looked to the others and said, I'll get your rooms ready. Follow me. Taewaya and her group followed the teal-haired girl to the hotel, but Taewaya noticed there were a lot of soldiers posted in the streets and asked her, what's up with all the guys? We'll talk about that once we get Naruto and the others down. Then you can tell me what happened with you and your team, Fu replied softly. Taewaya nodded, and with a look to her teammates, they began to follow Fu to their destination. Shaolin Temple. Rock Lee. What? Lee stammered out. You passed my test, Kung Lao repeated. This was a test. You angered me, and goaded me into a fight. For a test? Lee asked with a stunned expression on his face. There's so much that words can convey before they lose their meaning, Kung Lao told him. It's your actions during battle that reveals all about a person. My Shaolin master would always tell me that. Kung Lao smirked bitterly and said, he always said that my movements showed what he called honor and arrogance. I coasted on my ancestor, the great Kung Lao, but at the time, I truly believed that my blood made me who I was. And I paid for that arrogance with my original life. Lee gave a look of confusion and asked original. What do you mean by that? I've lived 3 lives. The first was my original life. The second was my life as a perverted version of myself, as well as my redemption, and the last life. Well, our life. Lee looked startled by the final words that the Shaolin monk had said. Our life? Lee asked him. What did he mean by that? Well, let me begin. And so, Lee was told everything from Kung Lao's life. From the moment of his entry to the White Lotus Society, his Shaolin Temple, to his death at the hands of Shao Kahn, and beyond that as a slave of Quan Kai and Shinnok, his subsequent redemption by his cousin Kung Jin, and finally, his second death by the hands of his best friend, Liu Kang. But when I died, Raiden sacrificed his life and helped build a new world, the world you live in. I am your past life, Kung Lao finished. Lee blinked. Oh, Lee stammered out. Oh? I was expecting anything else but that reaction, Kung Lao noted. I mean, it makes sense, Lee said. But what happens now? As I mentioned before, you passed my test. I knew from the minute I woke up that Raiden's plan had succeeded, Kung Lao told him. Long story short, this was supposed to happen to our reincarnations if something huge was coming. Since I am here, that huge event could be on its way, but when I woke up, I was concerned. Concerned about who you had reincarnated to? Lee asked. Kung Lao nodded. I was concerned that all of the hard work in dulling my arrogance had failed, and my reincarnation was just as, or maybe even more, prideful than I was. But that battle we had showed me that you are far from that. Sure, you're as hot-headed as me, but you are humble and driven to prove yourself on your own merits instead of others, unlike me. It showed me that in a way, my redemption had paid off, Kung Lao said before he walked up to Lee and stood before him. I will not lie. My prideful nature is still there. Not as sharp as it was in the past, but there. But if we become one, not only will our prowess in martial arts increase dramatically, but perhaps, we can even each other out, and maybe, we together can make your dreams a reality. Kung Lao then held out his hand to Lee, and asked, we wasted a lot of time fighting, but it was necessary, but the window to returning life back into our body, is closing, so I ask of you. Would you like to work together to build your legacy of hard work? Lee stared at the hand and then back at Kung Lao, before he looked the monk right in the eyes. So doing this will bring me back to life, but make us one whole being. I would have access to your skills, and I'm assuming your memories, right? Lee asked him. That would be correct, Kung Lao told him. Then you would know the identity of a woman with glowing yellow eyes, that can use magic from some place called Adenia, right? Lee questioned. Kung Lao frowned, but he nodded and said, I know exactly who she is. She is a very powerful villain that I've battled on 3 different occasions. She killed me after saying I was no Kung Lao, ironically enough, Lee said as anger slowly began to build in his voice. If she was willing to kill me, there is no telling what she has done to my friends. And I want revenge. Will you help me gain it? Lee asked with a determined look on his face. Kung Lao was quiet for a moment before he gave a nod, which made Lee nod as well. Then we have a deal, Lee said before he took Kung Lao's hand, and with a burst of white lotus petals, the world around him brightened until nothing but light was seen. Village of Hisako Hotel. UN Hunting Squad. Cage Teiwaya. I do not believe this. Guy yelled as he slammed his fists on the circular table that sat in front of him, causing Fu to flinch before she let out a sad sigh. After putting Kakashi, Aomoi, Samui, Shikamaru and Naruto in their respective rooms, Fu had told the group that her friend Kin had broken out of prison and attacked Team Guy and defeated them soundly. Hinata was devastated while Guy was in disbelief. Teiwaya watched as Fu lowered her head and whispered, "It's true, Guy-san." A very powerful prisoner broke out and attacked them. The long-haired one lost his eyes, the woman her arm, and the green-wearing one, his life. No, 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 Hinata repeated over and over as she held her head in her hands. Teiwaya watched as both Kurenai and Sakura tried to console Hinata, but she shook them off. "Fu-san, tell me where he is. I need to know." Fu let out a sigh, and replied, "He's on the 3rd floor of the hospital." Hinata nodded and ran out of the room, with both Sakura and Kurenai nodding their thanks and following the princess. Meanwhile, Guy excused himself as well, a look of despair on his face, leaving Anko, Sasuke, Haku and herself with the mayor. "Hey guys, why don't you get some rest?" Teiwaya told Anko, Sasuke and Haku. "We've been through some heavy shit. Not to mention we had to take a 3-day trip in one. We all need the rest." "You're right," Anko yawned out as she stood up. "Besides, we can't do much until we're all awake. Might as well rest up." Sasuke nodded and stood up with an exhausted nod and walked to his room, while Anko retreated to hers. Haku walked up to Fu and gave her a small hug before she left for Naruto's room, leaving Fu and Teiwaya alone. "This is great. I haven't been mayor long and already a prisoner escaped, and 3 shinobi were injured," Fu muttered softly as she moved from the table and sat down on the couch near the window. "I know, Fu, but it's not your fault Kin broke out and did what she did," Teiwaya said as she sat beside the teal-haired mayor of Hisako. Fu looked at her and placed her head on Teiwaya's shoulder, which caused the holder of the emerald light to look at her curiously. "Can I just stay like this? Just for a bit?" Fu asked her. Teiwaya nodded and laid her head against Fu's head, and closed her eyes with a small smile. "I thought about you, you know," Fu murmured softly. "When I saw that crimson light, and that beautiful one as well, I knew you were involved." "You're right on the money, Fu," Teiwaya murmured back. "It's stupid, isn't it? We've only known each other for such a short amount of time, and yet I worried," Fu whispered softly, her voice becoming slightly drowsy. "Heh, not even remotely. I'm sorry I made you worry," Teiwaya replied before she heard Fu chuckled sleepily before a gentle snoring left the teal-haired girl's lips. Teiwaya chuckled began to drift off to sleep as well. Village of Hisako, Hospital. Hyuga Hinata. Hinata felt sick to her stomach as she stared at Neiji's unconscious body on the bed, his eyes wrapped up in multiple bandages. Fu had told the group what had happened to Team Guy. They were attacked by a very powerful prisoner. This was all her fault. She had caused this. Because of her arrogant actions of humiliating actions in breaking the egotistical pedestal that her cousin was sitting upon, he had been around to lose his eyes, the thing that made him the prodigy of her clan, as well as 2 teammates, one just losing her arm, but the other losing his life. "Oh Neji." Hinata whimpered as she sat by his bedside, tears falling from her eyes. "I'm so sorry. This is my fault." Neji began to groan softly before his head slumped forward and he murmured, "Hinata-sama. Is it you?" Hinata let out a tearful gasp as she rushed to Neiji's side and grabbed his hand. "Neji-nai. I'm here," Hinata told him. "Can you forgive me for how I acted towards you?" Neji asked weakly. "No, I should be the one apologizing. If I didn't injure you, you wouldn't have been here to get hurt and lose your eyes," Hinata told him. Neji shook his head, and laid his head back, and murmured, "You helped me open my eyes. I can never be mad at you for that, even if it led to this." And with those words, Neji drifted back off, leaving Hinata to look at him with a worried frown. "Had I known that opening your eyes would have lead to your losing yours as well as lead to Aang and Tenten losing her arm, I would have never done it," Hinata whispered to the sleeping blind Hyuga before she lowered her head. This was her fault, and she would find a way to make it right. No matter what it would take. Village of Hisako Morgue. Rock Lee. Rock Lee's body lurched up of the metal bed with a sharp gasp of hair, his black hair longer and his eyes a little more narrow than before, his bare chest far more defined and muscular than it had been before. Rock Lee panted softly, before he looked around, and said, "It worked. It actually worked. Ha ha ha." Rock Lee then turned around to see the mortician of the city staring at him with a pale look on his face with a knife in his hand, probably was preparing to cut him open. Hi, Rock Lee said with a sheepish boyish grin. The mortician fainted. Oh boy. Rock Lee muttered with a faint laugh. Shinobi World. Tsuchi-kin. Kin wiped her forehead as she stumbled on several uprooted tree trunks as she ran through the forest, glancing back periodically. She didn't know how long she had been running in this place, but it felt like an eternity. But seeing no one behind her, she began to realize she was safe and sound. She let out a sigh of relief and leaned against a tree and pulled out a water bottle she had stolen on the way out of Hisako. She popped the top off and drank the water before she noticed something. Hiding in a bunch of tree branches and uprooted earth was a familiar face. Or well, faces. Seiken and Yuden, two of Orochimaru's top men, was there and to her surprise, was still alive despite their injuries. They seemed to be unconscious however. Kin smirked as markings began to form on her body. She could use them to her advantage. She just had to heal them first. Kyuubi's chambers. The Uzumaki Naruto. Singing. That was the first thing Naruto heard as he slowly came to. I don't know what words I can say. The wind has a way to talk to me. He could tell through the drowsiness that it was the Kyuubi's voice that was creating such a beautiful sound. Flowers sleep, a silent lullaby. I pray for reply. I'm ready. It was then he felt a gentle hand brushing through his hair, but Naruto kept his eyes closed, allowing himself to enjoy the singing and the petting. Quiet. Days. Calm me. Oh, serenity. But as he enjoyed this strange spoiling, it would give him time to think on a few things. Someone please tell me. He could remember exactly what happened. Something had pushed him through that hurdle, and caused him to revert to a powerful yet uncontrollable form he had never had before. But how did he get pushed to that level? He had a feeling that the Kyuubi had caused this change, but he didn't know for sure. Oh, what is it they say? Maybe I will know one day. I would like to know someday as well, Kyuubi Naruto thought before he felt her hand stop before it continued going through his hair. I don't know what words I can say. The wind has a way to talk to me. But maybe I can wait for a bit and enjoy a little longer. Naruto thought with a small smile. Flowers sleep, a silent lullaby. I pray for reply. I'm ready. The area remained quiet for a moment before the Kyuubi said, I used to sing this song to your mother when she was younger afraid. It was the song I was singing the night she was giving birth. It sounded wonderful, Naruto replied after a moment. I saw her as a daughter and she meant the world to me. The Kyuubi told him softly. That night, I was blinded by anger, but I also felt hurt that they were trying to seal me up again. Hurt? But why? Naruto questioned. She once told me that she would help me become free from this prison. But instead of allowing me to be free, she and her husband sealed me away, and at the time, all I felt was betrayal, but now, I understand this was the best option. I was destroying their home in my blind anger after being swayed by that Uchiha, and she knew if this continued, things would get worse for them as well as for me. Kyuubi then let out a small chuckle and said, I just hope I'll be able to be free one day. Hey, as long as you don't try to kill me anything like that, I'd like to help, Naruto replied. The Kyuubi hummed before she said, the reason I told you this is because of what happened during the battle with Shao Kahn. How did you do it? Naruto asked her. You don't remember? Kyuubi asked him. Naruto shook his head. I had a feeling you wouldn't. Well, I essentially shattered by showing you your worst nightmares. It got you to unlock more of your revenant abilities as well as using a tail of my power. But I didn't know it drive you to become a wild animal. You did what you had to do, Kyuubi. I don't blame you, Naruto said as he fully opened his eyes to stare up at the orange eyes of the regal demoness. It's the second time you saved me. Thank you. Let's not make it a habit, Kyuubi told him before a tiny smile appeared on her face. Naruto shut his eyes once more and said I need to go back to the real world soon. Your body is still out of whack. Rest while I fix it, and then I will send you back, the Kyuubi told him. Naruto nodded and said very well. He then hesitated. Do you mind singing again? The Kyuubi chuckled and ran her hand through his hair as she sang out I don't know what words I can say. Unknown location. Yamanaka Ino. Dumbest birds. Stop chirping, Ino muttered in annoyance before she opened her eyes with a groan and looked around. Ino found herself in a long colonnade with smooth white marble floors, the columns being made of solid gold. From where she sat, it was connected between two buildings, with the colonnade itself being outside, which allowed the sunlight to stream into the hall. Where was she and how did she wind up here? The last thing she remembered was being in fucking heaven of all places, and then she found herself here in this odd place. Ino looked down at a reflection on the smooth waxed surface before she realized that she could see a reflection of someone a few feet away. The person was a dark-skinned female with long black hair which was styled in a braided ponytail that reached down to the curve of her back. She wore a jade-colored shirt with an armored green and gold corset, skin-tight black pants, green gloves that stretched to her elbows, and along with gold and green boots that went up to her knees. The woman turned around and placed her pole around her shoulders, and turned around to face Ino, her almost glowing green-colored eyes warm and welcoming. "Ah, you're finally awake," the woman said as Ino felt her legs turning into jelly. This woman was insanely attractive. "Wah? How? Who?" Ino stammered out. The woman let out a gentle laugh and said, "You are beguiled by my visage. I do not blame you." "Well, hell. You are beautiful," Ino said. "As well as deadly," she replied. "No one told me you were this beautiful. I could see people going to war for you," Ino told her as she walked to the woman, which Ino realized as she got closer that the woman was taller than her. "You know who I am," the woman said with a small grin. "Jade. Fujin and Kairos. They said I was you in a past life," Ino said. "And man, did I win the lottery with you. Holy shit, you look magnificent." Jade let out a chuckle and then lowered her hand to caress Ino's face, once again making her face red. "Why, thank you. You are very beautiful yourself," Jade told her, which nearly caused Ino to faint. "They are correct. I am however surprised that Fujin brought me up to speed when he did what he did. He is truly serious that he wants you to be the central contact between heaven and earth realm," Jade replied as she stared down at the red-faced Yamanaka. "So you know what to do then?" Ino asked. "We become one, simple as that," Jade replied. "Good, because hell, I know I look good now, but if we combine, I'll be stunning and deadly as hell. I have zero qualms about us becoming one," Ino said cheekily. "So you know how to do this?" "Of course. Close your eyes and I will do the rest," Jade said. Ino nodded and shut her eyes, and without warning, she felt warm lips press against her forehead, causing her legs to nearly give out as her blush deepened. "You are very brave, Yamanaka Ino. I can't wait to see what we make together," Ino heard Jade murmur before Ino heard a fierce wind pick up around her, getting louder and louder until it was all she heard. "Time Cavern. Time Guardian Kairos. Why? Why did Shao Kahn return?" Kairos asked herself as she observed the Hercules in front of her with her arms crossed. It was then she felt a huge gust of energy explode from behind her, which caused her to turn around to see green energy flowing in an orb around Ino's resting body. "It is done," Kairos noted as the green energy orb faded away, revealing Ino's form. Ino was now taller and had curves, her previous pale skin was more caramel color. Her hair was longer, stretching down to the middle of her back, and it was in a braided ponytail as well. Ino clenched her eyes before they opened to reveal her platinum blue eyes, that held flecks of jade green within them. Ino rose up from the bed she was laying on and looked straight at Kairos. "How do you feel?" the Time Guardian asked. Without warning, Ino threw a jab, which Kairos caught, but a wave of green Edenian energy flew from the back of her hand due to the impact. "My, what a way to say hello," Kairos noted dryly, hiding the pain her hand was in due to the impact of the punch. "That was me telling you to never steal my body again," Ino told her with a glare. "Noted. Welcome back, Jade," Kairos said. Ino replied. "Jade was my past life, and while I look to honor it with the skills I have been blessed with reuniting with, I am Yamanaka Ino, so I prefer to be called that." "Very well, Ino," Kairos said as she released Ino's fist. Ino nodded and stood up and said, "I already know the logistics of my mission. You let me know if something happens time-wise." "I shall," Kairos said. "We are teammates after all." Ino narrowed her eyes and said, "All right. I am returning to my real body now. So long." Kairos watched as Ino walked off, but Kairos gave a whistle, which caused Ino to pause. Kairos walked behind the Hercules and grabbed a metal staff and a razor-edged boomerang. "Catch!" Kairos yelled. She tossed both weapons at Ino. Ino caught the staff first and spun it over her head, behind her back and to her side, before she caught the razorang and collapsed it. "I feel more at home with these in my hands." "You kept them?" Ino asked. "I had a feeling we would meet again," Kairos said with a grin. Ino let a grin appear on her face as well as she said, "I haven't fully forgiven you yet, but this is a wonderful start." And with those words, Ino walked away and her body vanished in a green shimmer, leaving Kairos alone once more. Kairos shook her head and returned to look at the Hercules of time, her eyes narrowed in thought. Village of Hisako Hospital. Rock Lee. "Sorry again for scaring you," Lee said as he gave a brief bow and walked out of the morgue, now dressed in his torn green uniform. Now that he was free from that, he could find his two teammates. But he didn't have to wait long because he heard Tenten's agonizing screams coming from upstairs. Tenten, Lee said before he quickly rushed to the stairwell and ran up them at a speed he was slightly unfamiliar with. He got to the first floor and listened for her scream, but it was still a ways up, so after going 3 more floors up, Lee found himself on the right floor. He ran down the hall, peeking through the windows of each hospital door, before he found the one Tenten was in. She looked to be in so much pain, but what disturbed Lee was that her arm was gone. Lee shook his head and opened the door, and pushed the 3 nurses and the doctor aside with a "move out of my way." Before he sat by side, grabbed her good hand and said, "Tenten-chan. It's okay. I'm here. I'm here." Tenten's eyes fluttered open briefly as sweat poured down her fear-etched face. "Lee-kun. Make it stop. It hurts so much." Tenten wailed in as she tossed and turned. Lee felt his heart crumble at the sight of his normally strong teammate reduced to this. He placed a hand on her neck and pressed the pressure point, which caused his wail to die out into a faint murmur where she slept peacefully. "Oh Tenten-chan. Did that woman do this to you?" Lee asked her sleeping form before he turned to one of the doctors and grabbed his jacket and pulled him close as he asked, "What happened to her? How does she lose her arm?" "You're alive," the doctor said with shock. "I saw your dead body just last night. This is impossible." "Nothing is impossible when it comes to this realm," Lee said. "What happened to her?" "Relax, Shinobi-san. Last night, you, Tenten and Hyuga Neji were brought here. You were killed." Tenten-san was stabbed in the chest, and her right arm was severed, and the Hyuga's eyes were taken. The doctor explained. "Neji's eyes were taken," Lee murmured as he released his grasp on the doctor's jacket. "He died. And Tenten and Neji lost a limb and eyes respectively. This was truly dire. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have tousled you up like that. It's just she's my teammate, and I hate to see her hurting like this," Lee said with a frown on his face. "It is fine," the doctor said. "We understand all too well considering our recent issues. We will take good care of them both, I assure you." Lee nodded and then asked, "Where is my other teammate, Hyuga Neji?" "Nurse Rukia. Please take him to see his teammate," the doctor said. "Yes, Dr. Kurosaki," Nurse Rukia said before she motioned for Lee to follow her. Lee turned to give Tenten one last look and a mental promise to see her again before he turned away and followed the nurse. Lee was taken one flight down where he saw Sakura and Kurenai coming up the stairs. "Ah, Sakura-san. Kurenai-san," Lee said with a wave. "Lee? We were told you were dead," Sakura exclaimed, but Kurenai merely let a smile appear on her face. "I got better," Lee replied with a grin. "Welcome back," Kurenai said. "Thanks," Lee said with a confused tone in his voice. "Ahem," Nurse Rukia said dryly. "Can we continue?" "Yes. Please lead the way," Lee said. The nurse led the 3 to the room down a hall where the door was wide open, revealing Hinata sitting by Neji's side. "Knock, knock," Nurse Rukia said, which prompted Hinata to turn around. "More guests for the Hyuga gentleman." The nurse then promptly turned around and left, leaving Lee, Kurenai and Sakura alone with Hinata and the unconscious Neji. "You're alive," Hinata said as she slowly stood up. "Well, again," Lee said with a shrug. "Nice to see you again, Lady Hinata." "You as well, Lee," Hinata said before she asked. "I didn't expect you to be the reincarnation of Kung Lao of all people, but you don't seem as arrogant as he is." "He grew and adapted to humbleness when we talked," Lee said with a grin. "Wait. You're just like Naruto-kun, Teiwaya-san and Hinata-chan, Lee-san?" Sakura asked. "Aye. But enough about me. Has he awakened at all?" Lee asked, referring to Neji. "For a few moments, but then he went unconscious. This is all my fault. I should have never did this," Hinata said with a frown on her face as she looked back at Neji's unconscious form. "It's not your fault," Kurenai said. "Yeah. Neji was an asshole who treated everyone beneath him. He needed someone to take him down a Pagger 7, Sakura said. "Admittedly they are correct," Lee said. "Tenten and I can vouch, but he became so much better after what you did to him that date." He said the same thing, and yet it doesn't change anything. "I still feel guilty," Hinata replied. "But at the same time, all of you are still alive, and had I not done this, Shao Kahn would have killed more, I'm sure." "I'm sorry, Shao Kahn," Lee asked with surprise. "You guys fought Shao Kahn. First, how? Second, how? It's a long story, but we should get out of here and return to the hotel. We can explain there," Hinata said. The trio nodded and together, the 4 left the room, unaware that a blindfolded spirit had heard the entire conversation. Village of Hisako Hotel. Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto opened his eyes and found himself staring at the sleeping Haku, and felt a warm smile appear on his face. As promised, the Kyuubi had sent him back to his body once he was healed and well rested, and now he was staring at the face of the woman he loved. Naruto caressed Haku's cheek and murmured, "Thank you for saving me," before he placed a tender kiss on her forehead and watched as a dreamy smile appeared on her face. Naruto quietly slid out the bed and made his way to the door. Village of Hisako Hotel. Cage Teiwaya. Teiwaya's eyes slowly opened when she felt something hit her lap, and when she glanced down, she saw Fu's head on her lap, still sleeping after the rough days she had. Teiwaya stared down at the teal-haired girl, and felt a tender smile appear on her face. Teiwaya had always been a flirt, in her past life and current life, but there was something about the Jinchuriki that made her heart skip a beat. Was it because Fu had defeated her in combat? That could definitely be the case. Teiwaya was always known as the biggest, baddest bitch in the land, but this sugary sweet girl managed to defeat her. Teiwaya let a hand brush against Fu's cheek, which made the girl nestle her face on Teiwaya's lap, making the girl blush faintly. "Boy. As much as I would like to see you there, at least let me take you out to dinner first," Teiwaya murmured with a small grin. She then heard the door open and looked up to see Naruto walk out of it quietly. "Finally awake, I see," Teiwaya said as Naruto closed the door slowly and turned his head to look at her. "Ah, hey Teiwaya," Naruto said with a wave. "I just woke up. Haku is still resting and I prefer it that way." Naruto then cocked his right eyebrow, and Teiwaya immediately knew what he was looking at. "So is that official or what?" Naruto asked her. "I mean, don't all rivals do this?" Teiwaya asked. "I don't remember Grandmaster Kuai Liang doing that with them." Naruto paused as a burst of cold air hit the room. "Yo, why the hell did it get so cold?" Teiwaya asked. Fu groaned and shivered as she opened her eyes, and murmured, "The air conditioning is off." "Who turned it on? Why is it so bloody cold?" Anko shouted as she walked out of her room. Sasuke followed seconds later from his own room with a blanket around his body, a sour look on his tired face. "It's freezing," Sasuke growled out. "Don't look at me," Fu said. "The air conditioner is off so it shouldn't be so cold." Anko looked down at Fu and then to Teiwaya, and gave a wicked smirk. "Did we interrupt something?" Anko asked curiously. Both Teiwaya and Fu blushed heavily as Fu quickly removed her head from Teiwaya's lap. "It was nothing," Fu said with an embarrassed tone in her voice. "Right," Anko said before she looked to Naruto and said, "Well, look who's up and about. Shao Kahn's killer." "Naruto," Sasuke said with a nod. "Sasuke, glad to see you are uninjured. Although Anko-san, I thought you died," Naruto said as he looked to her. "He got me in the first half, not going to lie, but for some odd reason, I was in Ino's body, and then I was returned to my living one. It was strange," Anko said with a shrug. "But I'm alive and I can't wait to train you." Train M. Naruto was interrupted by the door down the hallway opening up. The group looked down the hallway, which began to frost over into solid ice. Teiwaya stood up and almost immediately motioned for Fu to stand behind her in an effort to protect her. Naruto let hellfire form in his hands and he said, "Be on your guard everyone." The shinobi nodded and seconds later, the door opened to reveal Amoy's form, but immediately, Teiwaya knew something was amiss. Amoy was taller and bulkier than he was before. His hair was white, but there was a hint of icy blue, and his forearms had a sheet of ice on them, but it was his eyes. His eyes were an icy blue in color, and there was a small grin on his face. There was something painfully familiar about Amoy now that she didn't catch before. "Wait. Cold. Icy hallway, Amoy." "No fucking way," Teiwaya whispered. "All this for me?" Amoy asked with a tilt of his head. "I thought we had an accord back at the hotel, Naruto. Or should I call you Grandmaster Hasashi?" "Naruto. After everything that's happened, at least I got that answer." "As to that accord, it hasn't changed, old friend," Naruto said as the hellfire faded from his hand before he walked up and held out his right hand. "Again we meet Grandmaster Liang," Naruto said to Amoy. "Again and always Grandmaster Hasashi," Amoy replied as their hands clasped together, a burst of ice and hellfire appearing briefly from their hands. "I didn't expect us to meet again, admittedly," Amoy said. "I died fighting Kang's army and then again fighting those replicants. Neither was Liu Kang's Netherem army, and Shao Kahn was even worse," Naruto said. Whoa, that guy is just like you, Hinata and Teiwaya?" Sasuke asked curiously. "Yes. I wasn't exactly expecting this, however," Naruto said with a grin on his face. Sasuke nodded and said, "It seems like it happens every time someone dies. Well, no offense, but I don't want that power at that sort of price. Not anymore at least. Now if you need me, I'm going back to sleep." Sasuke turned and walked away back into his room and shut the door. "I missed something," Naruto muttered. "What did I miss?" I missed some stuff too apparently, Amoy said. Who was that? Where are we? What happened to my team? Well, Freezy Pop, shit went down, Teiwaya said, which caused Amoy to look at Teiwaya and grin. Nice to see you again, Grandmaster Liang. Or is it Amoy still? Amoy. I may have his memories and it may take a bit for it all to settle, but I go by Amoy now, Amoy responded. But before I do, hello to you too, Miss Cage. Teiwaya smirked before she noticed the confused look on Fu's face. What's going on? Fu asked Teiwaya. It's a long story, beautiful, Teiwaya replied. A story I will tell you as soon as I can. Well, the gang is almost all here, Anko said. Since you decided to ruin my beauty's sleep, we might as well gather everyone and go over what the hell happened. That would be a good idea, Naruto admitted. I agree, another voice said, prompting everyone to look up to see a smirking Ino leaning on the banister. Uzumaki Naruto, Amoy, Teiwaya Aka Hasashi Hanzo, Liang Kuai and Cage Cassie. The three instantly got on guard as Ino leapt onto the banister and flipped down to the ground gracefully. Both Teiwaya and Fu swallowed in unison at the sight of Ino. She was a straight knockout now. Ino-san, Naruto said. Or Jade. Ino replied before she leaned back against the wall and eyed the pair. Glad to see some familiar faces, Ino said before she glanced at Teiwaya and Fu, and gave a wink before she said, as well as some new ones. Gee. Fu mumbled while Teiwaya forced down the blush on her face. Yeah. You're drop dead sexy now. I got it, Teiwaya said with a grumble. Now, shall we find Lady Hinata? Ino asked curiously. For we have much to discuss. She went to the hospital to see Neji. He apparently fought some yellow-eyed woman who struck him down, Anko said. I see. I shall get more information from her. Thank you, Anko-san, Ino said before she pushed herself off the wall and said, well guys. Let's get going. But just a few seconds later, Hinata, Lee Kurenai and Sakura entered the room and paused when they saw the group standing there. Okay, we missed something. What did we miss? Sakura asked curiously before she spotted Naruto and shouted Naruto-kun. Teiwaya watched in amusement as Sakura's body slammed into Naruto's in a tight hug, as Naruto took a step back, only to return the hug with a soft laugh. Thank you for saving us from Shao Kahn, Naruto-kun, but don't you ever do that again. You nearly died. Sakura said as she sniffled slightly. I will not do that again, I promise, Naruto replied before the two continued their embrace. Teiwaya then heard Hinata's sharp gasp, which caused Teiwaya to look the stunned Hyuga princess. Hinata took a step back as she stared at Ino long and hard. It can't be. Ino let a warm, love-filled smile appear on her face as she brushed past everyone and stood in front of Hinata. Hello, Lady Katana, Ino said gently. You? Ino? You are. Hinata stammered out as tears fell from her eyes. Jade. She finally yelled before she hugged Ino tightly and began to sob against Ino's chest. I looked everywhere for you in the NarutoxHarem, but you were gone. Gone. I was gone. But now I'm back, Lady Hinata, and I'm not going anywhere I can. I swear on our Dinian spirits, Ino whispered as she hugged Hinata back, pressing a gentle kiss on top of Hinata's head. Okay, we really missed something, Sakura said with confusion. Hinata and Ino were best friends in their former life, Naruto said, which caused Sakura to tilt her head. I can kinda see that, Sakura responded. Meanwhile, a Shaolin monk is in our presence, Amoy said as he looked to Lee, who gave a small wave in return. Hello Grandmasters, Lee said before he looked at Teiwaya and said hello Slayer of Shinnok. Yo? Long time, no see Shaolin, Teiwaya said. Good or evil? I deemed good, Lee said. That's good enough for me, Teiwaya said with a grin. Well, now that the party is all here, let's wake up Haku and get Sasuke down here, and give the full story because there is a lot both Kurenai and I have to explain, Ino said. Village of Hisako Hotel. Uzumaki Naruto. And that is the end of it, Kurenai said. Wow. Lee said. I woke up in the morgue this morning and I thought my strange day would be over. Apparently not. So Carrie was killed, and Samui is in a coma. This doesn't bode well, Amoy said with a cross of his arms. So the barrier that hid Earthrealm was weakened by both me and Shao Kahn. That is a kick to the stomach, Naruto admitted with a frown. Haku took his left hand while Sakura took his right, which caused him to look at them both with a small smile. You did what you had to do, Naruto-san. You saved us all, Sakura said. Nearly at the risk of yourself, Haku added on. But at least it can be healed and the others will be alive again. My brother is in heaven. I'm actually glad, Sasuke said softly. But this means we all need to get stronger in case the barrier does break. I agree, but we're down 4 people, Anko said. I believe Amoi-kun, Lee-kun and I shall remain here until Kakashi-kun, Tenten-chan, Neji-kun and Samui-chan are up and moving, Guy said with a beaming smile. I certainly agree with Guy-sensei, Lee added with a grin on his face. We will stay here to get them better, then return to Konoha. Konoha. It feels like ages since I've seen it, Naruto admitted. I would say I would hate to see it, but you guys sacrificed a lot to get me to return. You don't sound thrilled, Naruto, Teiwaya noted. I'm not. Konoha and I have no love and I have a lot of anger towards the Hokage for keeping a lot from me, Naruto replied. But if the barrier does break, we should go to Konoha to give them warning, and then travel to the other villages, and do the same, for we will need all the help we can get to stop them. I doubt they would listen. Elder gods, an evil realm in hell, people dying and being reincarnated. It sounds like a fairy tale, even if they have a way to find out we're telling the truth, Anko said with a grumble. We'll have to try, Kurenai said. But for now, we go back home and try to convince the Hokage. Then it's settled. We leave tomorrow, Naruto said. The group nodded. It was time to return to Konoha. Itakuga no Sato. Snake-san in Orochimaru. How disappointing, I was hoping he would last longer than he did, Orochimaru said with a sigh. Ah well. Kabuto. Please bring in the next candidate for our new sound group. Kabuto nodded and left the room only to return with a middle-aged male with long silk black hair, a leather green vest with gilded edges, a leather coat and baggy green pants. And who might he be? Orochimaru asked curiously. It wasn't often someone came to his village to talk to him, let alone walk into the room as if he owned the place. Me? The man asked, his voice low, smooth and confident. I am here to help you. Help me? And how will you do that? Orochimaru asked in amusement. There are many things that I know about you, Snake-san in Orochimaru. I know you want to have the strongest shinobi around. I know that you wish to destroy your former home in Konoha and kill the current Hokage, and your former sensei, Sarutobi Hiruzen. And I know that you want to live forever. My lordess asked for me to humbly request your services in killing a few shinobi for her. If you comply, I will create very powerful beings in return as well as give you what you've always wanted. Eternal life and youth. Orochimaru leaned forward in his chair, enraptured by what the man had said. How do you know of all of this? Tell me no or face the consequences. To Orochimaru's surprise, the man didn't look threatened. In fact, he was amused by this threat. My lordess has sent me to come to you two in order for you to hunt certain people down and exterminate them for her plan. She has told me what you seek and in turn, I am here to carry her will and offer you tribute, should you agree to do it, the man replied. Interesting. And if I refuse? Orochimaru asked. The man smirked and suddenly grabbed Kabuto's neck, surprising the teen, and then moved his hand towards his face, and began to move it back slowly. Kabuto began to scream as his soul was ripped from his body, leaving his body an empty and dead husk. The soul floated around the man's body before slipping inside his chest. Orochimaru stood up in shock at the act. Then your soul is mine to do what I see fit, the man replied. It is your choice. Who are you? Orochimaru repeated with a fearful tone in his voice. Kabuto was his strongest right-hand man, and to see him so easily dispatched unnerved him greatly, especially due to how calm and collect the man was doing it. The man smirked and said, I am Shang Tsung, and from the sound of your voice, you agree to our terms. Village of Hisako Hotel. Momochi Haku. Haku pulled away from Naruto's lips as the two panted, her forehead pressed against his, both of their faces slightly red. I miss that so much, Naruto panted out with a small smile on his face. Haku giggled and shut her eyes and said, seems we were always in battle. I forgot what it was like, just pause. Same here. We've been through hell and back, Naruto replied. Well, I think we deserve a little bit of heaven then, Haku said before she leaned forward to kiss Naruto again before the door burst open to reveal Sakura. Haku-chan. I need to talk to you. Sakura yelled out before she blinked and felt her cheeks heat up before she shut the door. Haku laughed softly and said, come in, Sakura-chan. Sakura peeked into the room and said sorry. Don't be, Naruto said. Come in. Sakura walked into the room, her face still a bright red before she sat down on the bed where Naruto and Haku sat. I have to say, at least you two are dressed. I don't think I'd be alright if you weren't, Sakura said bashfully. Hey, I'm not that gross, am I? Naruto asked Haku with a grin, which made her giggle. Far from it, love, Haku said before she said to Sakura, you wanted to speak to me. I did, but... Sakura drifted off to look at Naruto. Oh? Beautiful ladies only, eh? Well, I can take a hint. I'm going to find Teiwaya, Naruto said before he stood up from the bed and walked out the room and shut the door, leaving the pair alone. So Sakura-chan, what did you want to speak to me about? Haku asked. I didn't think I'd get this far admittedly, Sakura said with a sheepish smile. But I wanted to tell you this before I. Sakura drifted off, as if she was trying to find the words to finish. Before you? Haku asked. Haku could see a mask of frustration appear on Sakura's face. Why can't I just say it? Sakura asked angrily. Just take your time, Haku said. I'm sure it'll come out when you're I'm in love with Naruto-kun, Sakura exclaimed. Haku blinked. Oh? Haku said with an astonished tone. Sakura covered her mouth in surprise, her entire head beat red. Whoops. The two stared at each other before they exploded with laughter. Village of Hisako Hotel. Amoy and Rock Lee. Amoy skidded back on the heels of his feet as Lee leapt towards him in the process of delivering a spinning triple kick. Amoy blocked the 3 kicks before he grabbed his leg and threw him forward, while creating a block of ice in front of him. Lee slammed through the ice but flipped to his feet immediately before he reached for his hat, only to realize he didn't have it on his head. Damn it, Lee growled out. Amoy dashed forward with ice coating his feet, and the ground around him aimed a punch at Lee's head, but Lee pushed it aside and landed 2 swift blows to Amoy's stomach, before he leapt up and delivered a chop to the middle of Amoy's head. Amoy fell to one knee and swept his leg beneath Lee's feet, which caused Lee to fall on his back, before he rolled up to his feet and caught Amoy's fist with his right hand, where he then aimed a jab with his free hand, but Amoy caught that. You're as quick as I remember, Amoy noted with an impressed tone as he and Lee began to stand, their hands still grasped. Still as crafty Liang-kun, Lee said with a wide grin on his face. The two stood for a moment before releasing each other's fists, and Lee began to rapidly punch at Amoy, but Amoy blocked each strike with his forearms, which had quickly become coated with ice. Amoy blocked the last fist and separated his arms and landed a swift palm to Lee's chest, which caused Lee to skid back on his feet, before Amoy placed both hands at his side and summoned an ice ball before launching it forward. Lee performed a twirling flip to the left, easily avoiding the ice ball, which collided with a tree and froze it, before he leapt towards Amoy and landed a right jab to Amoy's face, before he landed 15 jabs to Amoy's chest, before he turned and leapt up to perform a roundhouse kick, but Amoy leapt up as well, and kicked the leg into the opposite direction, which caused Lee to spin back around into an ice-enhanced right hook. The two shinobi fell to the ground on their backs and panted softly. Nice sparring session. Lee, Amoy said as he panted faintly. Seems my body still has to get used to being as hard and frozen an iceberg before I can be at full power again. I agree. While I am fast, the loss of my hat is noticeable in my techniques. Even with Guy Sensei's training. Lee replied, panting as well before he leaned up and said, that was a strong right hook. Those jabs were no joke either, Amoy said with a grin and a thumbs up after he leaned up off the ground. You guys looked awesome, Naruto said as he came into view, a grin on his face. Ah. If it isn't the Hellfire Shinobi himself, Lee said. You still owe me a match. And I intend to give it, Naruto said. Lee rolled backwards onto his feet, while Amoy placed his hands on the ground and used his ice to lift him up onto his feet. If Teiwaya was here, I'd believe she would say, that was so extra. But I think I'll say it instead, Naruto said with a roll of his eyes. It feels weird, doesn't it? Lee said. The air it feels. Lighter than usual. Well, back in our time, the air was filled with death. From the Netherrealm to Outworld, and even in Earthrealm. All that we saw was death, Naruto said. But now we're in a new world with a new chance to make things right. To make up for all of the evil we did under Quan Kai and Shinnok. Yeah. Amoy said with a grin. We just need to make sure this Earthrealm remains as lighthearted as it is now, and I intend to do so. Oh? How do you figure? Lee asked. Well, I always wanted to make my own village, Amoy said. Kumo is all good but I want more, and now that I am reunited in my past, I want to recreate the Lin Kui with people I can truly trust. I can understand that, Lee said. Since reuniting with my past life, I want to recreate the White Lotus Society, but make it not so rigid and not so against others of different lifestyles beliefs. My cousin, for example, had to suffer from people looking down on him because he loved those his own gender, and need I say that no women were allowed to join it. I want anyone and everyone to be united under the flag of Shaolin. What about you, Naruto? Are you looking to recreate the Shirayu? Amoy asked. I truthfully don't know, Naruto admitted. I mean, the last time I recreated it, I had to watch it be destroyed again before I died. again. Besides, the Shirai Ryu I was raised and control of were created to bring death. I think you should do it. Think about it. White Lotus, Lin Kuei, Shirai Ryu. United in as one to battle for Earthrealm and all of its enemies. Think of how good it can be, Lee said. In this new world, we can change things for the better. The way Earthrealm should have been. We can make up for all of our past transgressions and move forward to a brighter future. Amoy and Lee glanced at each other before they looked to Naruto. At the unsure look on Naruto's face, Amoy said, all three of us have fought against one another. We've shed blood as enemies. We have spilled blood as allies. Not only can this establish something wonderful for the three of us, this could be the redemption both of our clans never received in our past life, Naruto. Naruto remained silent for a moment, before he said back in Wave, I swore that I would be the beacon of hope, when it all seemed lost. When I came back, united with my past life, I was unsure of things. Of who I was. But after these events, saving Wave, saving Hisako, saving the world against Shao Kahn, I am more Uzumaki Naruto than ever before, but with the guidance and strength of my past life to assist in my dreams. Naruto grinned as hellfire flickered in his eyes. I want to use these powers that were created from a false vengeance to fuel a righteous flame of justice, and I want the Shirai Ryu to reflect this as well. So I agree. The Shirai Ryu will rise from the ashes of its fallen life, and bring forth a new era of peace, from any threats, and join this alliance. And in turn, the White Lotus will assist with blossoming a time of unity into this new world, Lee said. And from the bitter cold that was the Lin Kuei will bring in a peaceful snowfall that will blanket the world in honor and respect, Amoy said. The trio bowed towards each other with a shared smile. Village of Hisako Hotel. Momochi Haku. So how long have you known? Haku asked. Well, I didn't really know until Neji decided to use it to try and embarrass me back in Wave, Sakura explained. Admittedly, I can't believe it myself. I spent all of my time at the academy hating him for something he didn't deserve, and now, I'm hopelessly in love with him. Naruto seems to have that ability, Haku said softly. I had a feeling you did. The minute you saw him back in that town. You had this look of love in your eyes, when you were in his arms, and that feeling grew when he, Hinata and Teiwaya were unmasked into their past life forms. You didn't shy away from him. I know you're with him and I'm sorry I'm overstepping my bounds, but I want to be with him, Sakura admitted with a bowed head. I want him to look at me the way he looks at you. With love and affection. Haku was silent for a moment, before she said I understand, and admittedly, seeing you change from Wave to here. It's genuine. It's not out of jealousy, that you want him, or some attempt to get him under your thumb. I see it in your eyes that you are in love with him, and I can't sit here and be angry at it. Then what should I do, Haku-chan? Sakura asked. I don't know, admittedly, Haku replied. Because I know there's another that share your thoughts about him. Yeah, Hinata-chan, Sakura replied. She's been in love with him since forever. Then I wonder why she never made a move, Haku said. She was super shy. She would always faint every time he got close to her, Sakura said. Really? Haku said with surprise. Yeah, you'd be shocked, considering how she walks like a royal princess, Sakura said. But Hinata-chan is really nice. Even with this change. When I told her that I love Naruto-kun, she did exactly what you're doing. Talking to me and understanding and being very kind about it. Haku frowned and thought. She and Hinata had something in common. Interesting. Honestly, Naruto-kun deserves the world for all he's been through, and I want to give it to him, and seeing you now, compared to Wave, I see what made Naruto-kun like you in the first place. I think I'd be willing to let you give dating him a shot, Haku said. Are you serious? Sakura asked. Very. Living with Zabuza and adventuring with Naruto-kun, I realize that life is too short. We should grasp happiness where we can, and I want you to grasp it. But let me talk to Naruto-kun before you admit your love to him. Wow. I didn't think you'd. Oh, thank you so much. Sakura exclaimed as she leaned over to give Haku a tight hug and said, Your Naruto-kun won't regret it. I will make sure to love him for all he's worth if he allows me to. Haku smiled and returned the hug just as tightly. Anytime, Sakura-chan. Haku replied tenderly, before she pulled away, and said, But I am a fair Kunoichi, so. There is one more person I need to talk to. Hinata-chan, Sakura said. Yes. It's time I found out why she cares for Naruto so much. Haku replied. Village of Hisako Hotel. Hyuga Hinata. Staring up at the sky, Hinata had her head resting on Ino's lap, as Ino ran her hand through her hair, both of them watching the moon high above the sky. I really miss you, Hinata said softly. I'm sorry, Ino replied, her voice just as soft. I miss you too, but I promise you, I won't be going anywhere else. I will remain by your side. Hinata smiled warmly and shut her eyes, a tear falling from her left eye. When I was in the Netherrealm and saw you went missing, my heart broke. You were the only person, next to Liu Kang, that made me feel some semblance of normalcy with your witty remarks and coy smiles. Just like the days before the Mortal Kombat tournament. Yeah, I was told how brutal it had gotten after I left. Kung Lao left with his cousin to redeem himself, and then you left as well. Ino said. That's when things went bad. I saw a vision of our lives had Shao Kahn succeeded in killing Raiden. We would have defeated him, and Edenia would have been anew and together. You, I and Sindel, and even a redeemed Melina, would have ruled together, and ushered in peace. After that, I sought to make it come true. At least a part in redeeming myself. Hinata explained. And is that how Naruto? Well, Hanzo back then, got involved. Ino asked curiously. Hinata smiled and said yes. I have to say, Lady Katana falls in love with Hisashi Hanzo, and Hyuga Hinata falls in love with Uzumaki Naruto, the reincarnated versions of the former pair. It's so romantic, Ino said with a sigh. Stop it, Hinata laughed out as she slapped Ino's thigh, which made the Kunoichi laugh as well. So do I get story time? How Katana and Hinata fell in love with Hanzo and Naruto? Ino asked with extreme interest. Well, as my previous life's best friend and my growing best friend, how could I say no? Hinata replied. That's perfect because I was as well, a voice said from behind them. Hinata leaned up from Ino's lap and saw Haku standing with her arms crossed, her eyes solely on Hinata. Especially when it considers my boyfriend, Haku added with narrowed eyes. Interesting, Ino said as Hinata rose to her feet and rubbed her right wrist, readying herself for combat against the Hyoten user. Have you come to fight me for him? Hinata asked. I did throw out the challenge back then, didn't I? Haku replied. She did. Ino asked Hinata with surprise. She did throw out a challenge to me back before Shao Kahn occurred, Hinata said. I was waiting for you to keep your word. I'll leave you two to it then. Just try not to kill each other, Ino told them before she walked past the pair, leaving them alone. Haku smirked and held out her hand with the Naginata flickered into existence, while Hinata summoned her fans. Before we begin, I just have one question for you, Haku began. When I first Naruto, he told me that he was an outcast in his village. Everyone hated him for something he couldn't control. He had no one to love him or care for him, and in turn, he had no one purpose. He desperately needed someone there, so I ask you, where were you when he needed you? Hinata was ready for any sort of combat, but this question took the wind from her sails. She lowered her arms and dismissed her fans, which caused Haku to blink in confusion. Damn you for asking that. I can handle Sakura-chan asking, but not my opponent. Hinata admitted, the previous edge in her voice softening. Hinata dismissed the fans and sat down to look back out at the sky and said, sit with me. There was silence before she heard Haku's footsteps approach before she saw Haku sit beside her. There was another beat of silence before Hinata said I've known Naruto ever, since I was little. Before the merge of course. When I was 4 years old, Neji had just lost his father and my uncle that adored me all at once because of Kumo. They tried to steal me and father killed them. Hinata could feel the heartache in her chest remembering the pain she felt that day. In revenge, they asked for his death, and my uncle, his twin, died in his place. At the funeral I heard that my clan. They were going to put caged bird seal on Neji. They couldn't even wait a day. I left. I ran as fast as I could in the middle of the night in the snow until I fell. I started to cry. It all became so much. Hinata let several tears fall from her eyes. And that day was when I met him. He was alone. Walking in the snow with that red scarf, and the first thing he said to me was, "What are you doing? If you keep crying, how am I supposed to know?" I was stunned. He was cute to me back then. She could see Haku's small smile at this, while Hinata let out a soft chuckle. His eyes were breathing, taking to me. I'd never seen that shade of blue outside of the sky. He grabbed my hand and took my home and said, "Wow, you live in a big house like this and you're crying." I didn't know why he asked until he told me I don't have anyone, but I never cry. And he gave this big old smile, and weirdly enough, it made me smile. Hinata shook her head and said, "A week passed and I was being bullied because I didn't know how to activate my Byakugan. It was so rough, I was in tears, but once again, my savior in orange came. He tried to stop them, but they beat him up and hung his red scarf on a tree branch. But instead of being worried about his own injuries, he worried more about me and said, in his own words, when I become Hokage, I will make sure no one bullies anyone ever again." and then he ran off. I was barely able to thank him, and when I did, he told me not to worry about it. I was in love with him ever since. Then why didn't you tell him about this? He could have been with you. He wouldn't have needed to get into my heart and die for me, Haku replied, a hint of resentment in her voice. Anytime I did talk to him, my guardian would always come out of nowhere to stop it. The Hyuga clan has made no qualms of showing their dislike of him, and because of my low self-esteem, they made me believe he wouldn't want to be my friend. And I believed them, but I always watched from the shadows though. Admiring him, cheering him on, wishing to be with him. It's all I've ever wanted. You? Low self-esteem. You walk around here like you own the joint, Haku commented. This is after the merge, Hinata told her softly. But ask anyone. I was practically his shadow. Always there but never able to fully touch him in the same realm. A few minutes of silence passed between the two before Haku finally asked, so that's your story as Hinata. What is your past history with him? Hinata shut her eyes and replied, I do not wish to share that with you. And why not? Haku asked as she stood up suddenly. You were willing to tell Ino. Ino is my best friend in my past life, and becoming a quick one in this one, Hinata added as she stood up as well. You are my rival for the shinobi I desired in both lives. Tell me, Haku said forcefully as she got into Hinata's face. Get away from me. Hinata whispered. I have already entertained you for telling you my feelings about him as Hinata. I will not go into that when it comes to my past as Katana. If you want any shot of me deciding to give you a shot with Naruto-kun, you will tell me, Haku replied angrily. Unless you want me to fulfill my challenge to you. The two stood face to face, their foreheads pressing against one another with deep scowls on their faces. Haku's Naginata flickered in his left hand, while Hinata's fans appeared in her hands with a flourish of Athenian magic. Then do it, child, Hinata whispered with a challenging smirk. Cross the line and I'll make you regret, for I do what I want when I want, and if I want Naruto-kun, I will get him without your permission. So, when is the angry sex? Teiwaya's voice said all of a sudden, which caused the duo to turn their head to the left, to see an amused Teiwaya standing a few feet away from them. The pair had the decency to blush at the implication, but Haku and Hinata turned back to look at one another with another glare, before Haku walked off back into the hotel. Oh man, Teiwaya whined. I really wanted to see you two hate fuck. Hinata smirked softly and licked her lips as she watched Haku walk back inside the hotel. You see how close she was to me? She wishes she could satisfy me as a lover, Hinata replied. She was chomping at the bites to get her hands on me. Would be pretty hot to see, Teiwaya said with a grin. Hell, between you, Haku-chan and that cute pink-haired girl, Naruto would be in heaven to see you three doing each other and him. Hinata tilted her head. I suppose so, the Hyuga princess responded. I'm surprised you aren't all stuffy about it, Teiwaya said. Shao Kahn was the one bastard who raised me for most of my life, Teiwaya, Hinata said. He would have dozens of concubines servicing him and each other every day. Things like that don't shock me. Besides, while my father has remained without a lover since my mother passed, most Hyuga elders don't share his abstinence. So you wouldn't be opposed to? Teiwaya drifted off questioningly. Oh ho 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 ho, Hinata laughed richly. Wouldn't you like to know? Hinata retorted before she walked away, leaving Teiwaya alone. Actually, I would, princess. Teiwaya yelled as she jogged after her. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you want the next part of this video, like, subscribe and comment down below and turn on the bell notification. And also check out other videos that I have created and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.